What's up, folks? Welcome back to another video. This is an entire series where we're gonna walk you guys through how to build a merge stack app from scratch. If you haven't watched the video before, I highly recommend you check them out. If this is your first time on this channel, this is where we help you become a full stack developer. So if you're new here, consider subscribing, and we'll be right with you after the pause. But in this video, what we're going to focus on is from where we take off from the last video. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on the client, which means we're going to focus on the React application, the way it looks. We're going to build that form and send the data from the HTTP request all the way to the server, and then from the server saving them to the database. But now this whole process might look scary, but don't worry, we're going to walk you guys through step by step and explaining everything line by line. So without any further ado, if you guys remember, in this series we talk about this packet.json and how we set this step with concurrently. Now again, if you haven't watched it out, in order to know how to set up this prefix, highly recommend you check this series out. So in order for me to run this full application, the server and the client together, I'm gonna be running something like npm run dev, which I'm referring to that command inside the root folder. So that's all I'm doing. That's gonna go ahead and start my server and also my React application. If you notice here, we also have something that easily tell us either or not we were successfully able to connect to Mongoose or not. So here's our React application. We have something very basic, nothing fancy yet, a very simple scaffold from the Create React app. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go inside the client folder, we're gonna go inside the src and inside the app.js, and what we're gonna do in this case is we're gonna delete everything and we're going to start from scratch. We're gonna go here and start importing React. Once we have that, we're gonna define a class app and extend that. So we're gonna do React.component, and then we're gonna use the render function, and after that we're gonna set up JSX and return a very basic class and just say welcome to my app. Something very basic, and once that's done, we go ahead here and export that component. Now this might looks a little bit super fast. Again, this idea behind this entire playlist is to kind of show you guys how to connect the pieces together. So we do expect you to have an understanding of React. However, we're still gonna go and explain everything that we're doing here. So if I go now into the page, there we go. We have a very basic React application that we can work with that just say welcome to my app. So what are we about to do? What we want to do now is we're gonna build this form that we want to work with. So we're gonna build a very simple basic form, and within that form we're gonna have at least 2 div, and every single div gonna have a form of input, and we have something like this. Once we have our 2 div, the first one itself is going to be an input, and this input is gonna take a couple things. I'm gonna put every single thing here on a new line. Now the first thing is gonna have is a name that's gonna be equal to the title. Second thing is a value. For now, that value is gonna be empty, and an event that's going to be the one listen to any single change for that particular input. Again, all of them are empty right now because we don't have anything inside of them, and this one is the first div that contain an input. The second div, it's going to contain what they call a text area, and that text area also going to have a name called body, and potentially, and we don't want an ID for this, and we can leave the default the way they are right now. The only thing we're gonna do is we're gonna extend this one with a value that's gonna be empty right now, and we're also gonna add an onChange event that's also going to be empty right now. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our form. The only thing that we need to add now is a very simple button that the user can use to submit this form. Again, this should be pretty basic. There isn't anything complicated here. Everything that we have is a very basic form. Let's take a look and see how that looks right now. Whoops, seems like our application is crashing because this should have at least some value inside of it. So for now, I'm going to go inside wherever I have the onChange. I'm going to add the value 2. For now, again, this is just a placeholder because it does need to have a value, but we're going to replace this with actual will function. I just want you to see what this looks like right now. So let's take a look. So if we do that, this is what we have right now. Nothing basic, something very, very dummy right here. The only thing I would add would be like a placeholder for people to know what they are. For example, I would add something here like placeholder, and this one could be something enter title, or that could be just title itself. And the same thing for that text area. I'm going to go here and add a placeholder, and that placeholder could be referring to the body or something like that. And now if we go here, we have something, this kind of placeholder that tell us what this is. Again, this doesn't look fancy, and that's not the goal right now. What we want to focus on right now is we want to take the user input and send that value to the server. But how can we do that? Well, in order for me to do this, I'm going to right click, inspect that, just for us to kind of see what's going on behind the scene. And don't worry about this warning right now, we're going to fix them as we're going through. But first thing first, we want a way to get those value from the input form. So let's go ahead and do that. What I want to do is I'm going to set a state that's going to contain the value of every single one of them. So that's going to contain the value of the title, and that's also going to contain the value of the body. Now, instead of having this hard-coded value, now we're going to replace this with actually value that are coming in from the state. That's going to be the title value. Again, this is referring to that particular value in the state, which means whenever that value got updated, then it will get the latest data from that value. And we're going to do the same thing for the text area. The only thing is we're going to go here and put that into a new line for us to kind of really see what we're working on. So we end up having something that looks like this. We're also going to do that as well. And ladies and gentlemen, we have something that looks like this. So very basic, we just put them on a new line. So instead of having this empty value, we're going to actually replace that empty value as well with this, that state, that body. And again, that value is coming from the state, which is this value right here. So which means every single time that this value got updated, it will automatically update our text area on the fly. So now what we want to do is we want to add a function to every single input that we have, such as the text area, which means every single time that the user is typing, we want the state to be updated so that that value can have the latest updated of what the user typed. So in order for us to do that, I'm going to go here and declare a function called handle change, and that particular function is going to be the one that's responsible to update the state. So I'm going to pass this function right here wherever we have this unchanged. I'm going to call this function like this. I'm going to call the same thing like that as well. Now what we want to do, because this is an event that we attach this function to, it has access to a program here. We can call this one event, but what that means in particular, this has access to the entire event that are coming in from the dump. So we can get a value here called event.target. That's going to get the value of the current element that was firing that event, which is that's how we target that element that is firing that event. In this case, which is the input. Once I have that, I can get a couple things from that particular target. And what I'm referring to, remember, this is the target. For example, if I start typing inside this input form, then this entire input is the target, which means I can get any attributes on that input that I want to. So for this case, I want to get that attribute. So I can do, all right, this one is going to be the name. I can do target that name, and also I'm going to get the value of that particular target as well, which means I'm getting the value of that input if we type on it. So once I have those, I'm going to go here and use this value and update my state with it. What that is this is going, for example, if I'm typing inside the input, which has a value of title, so whenever this is happening, this value here is going to represent the title, which means it's gonna go and update that specific title in the state, and whenever it does, then that value here will be automatically updated accordingly to the state. So again, this is a way to dynamically pass whatever value that are coming in from this. For example, we're getting the title, and this one we're getting the body. So ladies and gentlemen, now that handle input form should be ready to go in order for us to see that in action. So let's go ahead and console log the state. And for here, I'm gonna do type state, and I'm just gonna do that state. And this is just gonna go ahead. Every single time that the input change, we're gonna see the state in action. So let's take a look and see what happened. So if I go back in the page, of course, the page refresh, and I start typing such as test one, you see the state got updated, and it's updating that particular value. But if I start typing for the body, it is updating that particular body. So everything so far is working really, really well. All right, so if you haven't made it that far, feel free to kind of rewind this and watch it. You really need to get this. This is the basic. We really wanted to make sure that we at least covering that part for you. So once we have that, the next thing that we need to do is we're gonna go and attach an event to that form. I'm gonna go here and attach one event called onSubmit, which means whenever the user submit this form, then I'm gonna fire one function, and I'm gonna define a function here. I'm gonna call this one submit, or submit something very basic, and this one is going to be the one that's responsible to take all the data that it needs and send it to the server. So I'm going to go here and pass this function on the form or wherever I have this. So I'm going to do this.submit, and this one, again, this is an event. It's going to take the entire event object, and I'm going to disable the browser behavior right here. So I'm going to disable that browser behavior and what that is this will stop the browser from refreshing. So once I have that, I'm going to build what they call a payload, which gonna contain the data that I want to send to my server. And what I mean by the payload is going to be the one that contain the title. That's one thing I want to send over, and also the body. Now again, we have those data coming from the state, so I could do state.title, and then I can also do state.body. We can refactor this, but I just want you guys to see exactly what I'm working with. So once we have that, this is when Reactjs is going to come in pretty handy. So I'm going to go all the way on the top, and I'm going to bring Reactjs here. So I'm going to go here and bring that Reactjs that we saw earlier. So once I bring that Reactjs, this is the one that I have, and this is what's going to make that HTTP call. Now, what we really want to happen is we want to make a post request because we are sending data to the server. So anytime that the client, aka the React application, the browser, is sending data to the server, then we want to make what they call a post request. So I'm going to go here and start building that. First, we need the URL of where the server is waiting for that request. And second, by default, Reactjs use get. So I'm going to explicitly say that, hey, Mr. Reactjs, we want a post request instead. And third, what are the data that you're sending? So the data I'm sending is called the payload, which is this entire data right here. And ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, this is everything that we need in order to send those data. And then after that, of course, we want to know if this data has successfully been sent, what happened to it in case there's an error, and that's when our promises comes very handy. We're going to add a couple function that kind of handle that case for us. For now, I'm just going to go here and add a very simple console. Data has been sent to the server, something very basic. This is just in case that the data has gone to the server and the server were able to process it and send a 200 response, which means a okay response, which means that everything went right. However, if there is an error on the server side, now the server can respond with a different error. It might be 500 errors. Then this is how we're going to use to cache that. So this message will be different, something like internal server error, something like this. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we should be good to go. Now, the only one piece we're missing is, all right, we know what type of request we're sending, which is a post request. We know the data that we're sending, but we don't know where we're sending that data. So let's take a look. Go back to our server. We're going to navigate to wherever we have our server inside our root and inside our API. And this is the routes that we have right now. We don't have a post route to receive those data. So we're going to create a very basic post request here. So I'm going to go here and define that post request. And I'm going to define this one to be a post. And I'm going to send something like save. And this is the route that the browser or the React application is going to use, as this is where they need to send those data. Now for this one, I'm going to send a very simple message, like something like, we receive your data, to let the client know that we have successfully received their data. And then over here, I'm going to go here and console log something here called request body. So let's take a look. So I'm going to go here and console log the body that are coming in order for us to see that. So technically, in the nutshell, whenever the server, aka our backend, receive a request on this route, then we're gonna console log the request body that are coming in, and also we're gonna send a very simple dummy message back and let them know that we have received our data. So if I go back into my React application, in order to connect the pieces together, all I need to do is define the port of where the server is waiting for it. If you guys remember, the server was listening on localhost port 8080. So I can go here and start typing something like http:/localhost, and I add the port 80. And remember, the starting point of that route was something called /API. So we put /API and then the slash of that particular route that we want to hit. In this case, which is this one. So I put save. So technically what's happening here is our React application is communicating over to our server using that port and targeting our specific routes in order for them to send that data back. So let's take a look and see what happened. Of course, a lot of things gonna happen, but we're gonna explain you guys what's happening behind the scene and how we can fix them. But before that, let's check and see if our server is running. Everything seems to be fine. So if we go back to the React application, all we need to do is add the data and then click that send button. So let's take a look. So I'm going to add something here such as test, and this is blah, whatever this is, okay? And then we're going to click submit. Check this out, right? We have this error, which means if you remember back into our React application, this was the error that we defined that will tell us either or not the request hasn't successfully made it through. Now check this out. There's a different error here, which of course looks a little bit intimidating, but the main takeaway from this is course policy. What the heck is this, right? So let's take a look. There's a really great article written by this domain. You can definitely check it out, but let's kind of go over the image and try to explain what's happening here, right? So the reason we having this issue is because when we look at this diagram right here, there is this server A, which means our React application, which think about it as a server because it is running on a port 3000. There is a server that is making that possible. So the bottom line is our React application is on a server that's running it on port 3000. However, we have a different server for our backend. If you guys remember, our backend is on a different port that is running on port 8080. We got two different servers. They're not on the same domain. And what's happening here is as long as the server is on the same domain or the same origin, then they can access resources or data within the same origin. However, if they're not in the same origin, then they're not able to access resources in a different origin. That's when you're gonna face that policy that's gonna tell you that you're trying to access data from a different origin. So the bottom line is as long as the server they're not on the same origin, then you're gonna run into that issue. So back into our React application, how can we solve this? Well, there are two ways we can solve this. I'm gonna show you guys which one is the easy ways. Number one is there is this package. So if we go back into the application, so there is this application called course, and this is the link for it. What we can do is we can download them in here. We can do npm install course and save that. Then once we have that installed, it's a matter of coming here and we can start importing this package over here. And once we import this package, then we can kind of go back into here and define this course right there. And ladies and gentlemen, that should solve this issue. Now, if we go back into the React application and click submit, and there you go, you see now the data has successfully been sent and there is no error. And of course, our server at least received this data. There is no error. However, this is not the ideal whenever you're building a merge stack application. Luckily, the Create React team makes it even a little bit easier. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go here and uninstall this package. I'm gonna go here, uninstall this package, remove these two lines of code in order to configure it. So I'm gonna remove this line and also remove this line. So how can we fix this building a merge stack application? Well, one easy way we can do that is head over the client folder wherever you have the packet.json inside the client folder, and I'm gonna go all the way at the end of it. I'm gonna go here and add a proxy, and then make sure that that proxy is going to your backend server, so which is going to be localhost port 8080. Whenever you do that, you're definitely gonna have to stop your server and then run all of them together from scratch. All right, while this server is going up, what is this doing? Like, why are we adding this line? Well, what's gonna happen is now whenever we're making an HTTP request inside our client application, so we no longer need to add that HTTP localhost to the server. We're just gonna put that /save, and what's gonna happen is all that requests, instead of going to port 8080, all that requests are going to go to the same origin as port 3000. We're going to show you that in a second, but the bottom line is every request now that we are making, they're all going on that same origin, which is port 3000. But if you remember, on port 3000, which is where the React application is, there isn't any API. Every API is on the backend. That's where the server is located, on that port 8080. Like, how is that going to connect to get those data? Right? Well, what's going to happen is that line that we added over here, what's going to happen is it's going to try to search for everything on port 3000. Now, if it doesn't find that route on port 3000, it's gonna route every single unknown request to port 8080, and then from there they can communicate and get that data back. Now, this might sound confusing, but let me kind of give you guys a demo on how this is working in action. So let's take a look. So here's an example here. I'm gonna add the same thing. I'm gonna add a very simple basic thing. Check this out. So when I click submit, of course, it's working fantastically fine, which is great. But how do I know that it's hitting the same origin? Well, let's take a look. So if I go under the network tab and make sure that you select XHR, well, here's the request that we make, which is save, right? So check this out. The request URL, the request that we make that to, it's port 3000. And if I take a look at the preview, which is the response that I get back, everything is going on the same origin that our application is working on, which is fantastic. Now, again, this might not make sense for you guys, but the goal behind this is you definitely need this line in order to route every single unknown request to your backend. All right, guys, this is great. This is fantastic. But check this out, right? So when we make a request, when I hit the server, which of course we got a response back, everything seems to be working, which means the data has been sent to the server. But if we go back into the route, wherever that is located on our server, check this out. When we console log the requests that are coming in, first of all, it's not being saved to our database, which we're going to take care of in a second. But second, this data that are coming in from the client, from the browser, they're coming in as undefined. So in the next video, we're going to walk you guys through how we can parse those data to make sure that we are getting the actual data that the browser sent. So see you guys in the next video.